Okay, well, it's 3:15, so I'm going to make a start. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are thrilled to have you here. As I mentioned, my name is Chelsea Smith. I am with EF Educational Tours Canada, and I am the Executive Director of Educational Affairs. And I am thrilled to be joined today by my colleague Elixa Neumann, who's a teacher in the Burnaby School District. And together today, we hope that you really enjoy this session and that you get lots out of it. A quick note, I hope that you can all hear and see clearly. If you are having any technical challenges, please feel free to use the chat function. And as we go through the presentation, we would love any questions, reflections, thoughts that you have. So please do feel free to be as interactive as you wish in that chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. So before we get started, I just thought I would introduce myself a little bit further. I have been with EF Educational Tours Canada about 1 year, and as part of my role, I look after the portfolio of over 350 different experiences for educators and students that are travel-based here in North America and further afield around the world. And what I will do also now is pass over to my colleague Elixa, and she will tell you a little bit about her position as well.
Hi, my name is Elixa Neumann. Like Chelsea mentioned, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm a teacher in the Burnaby School District. I've taught grades 5 through 9 of all different variety of students, and I'm really fortunate this year to be transitioning into online teaching. And I do a lot of virtual reality development and experiences with my students as well. So a lot of tech integration stuff. Yeah, I was very fortunate a few years ago to take my students to Iceland with EF Tours, and I hope to tell you more about that later in our session today.
Great. Thanks so much, Elixa. So really just a quick high-level overview of what we hope to achieve all together. I'm going to just do a quick overview of the intended objectives for the session. As part of our context setting, I thought it would be useful to share a little bit more about EF's purpose, our mission, and the work that EF Educational Tours Canada in particular does. Also, as part of the theoretical grounding of our conversation, I'm going to share what we call our global learning model, which really guides every educational experience that we create here at EF Educational Tours Canada. I'll then pass over to Elixa, and that's going to be, I think, the really exciting part of this session, where you'll get to hear from her about this experience of bringing students to Iceland in 2019. And then we will finish with some reflection, some discussion, and we will be more than happy to answer any questions that you have at that time. So, as I mentioned, over the course of the presentation, feel free to pop any questions into the chat. I will be monitoring that, and we will come back to it at the end so that we can answer anything that springs to mind as we are moving through. So the objectives for today, I think we can all agree that over the last few years, we have all collectively experienced major shifts in our various education systems across the country, our realities and student needs. And I think after so long apart, in isolation, outside of the classroom, I think what it's really reminded us is that the human connection and the power of that is really, really valuable in the development of young people. And there is so much to learn from one another within the classroom, peer-to-peer, but also from different people in different countries experiencing different realities. And so what we really want to do today is for you to leave feeling really inspired and equipped to find ways to use outside of the classroom or travel-based learning to foster students' abilities to become interconnected citizens, global citizens that have an awareness of our planet, different geographical regions, cultures, and environmental realities. And I think through the lens of Iceland, you are going to see all of those things come to life. So EF's purpose and mission. Our purpose is really quite simple. We believe that the world is better when people try to understand one another. And we have a range of different education platforms that bring people together. We have language, travel, cultural exchange, and academic programs. And through all of that different type of programming, we help people communicate, experience other cultures, and also expand their understanding of the world. Our mission is to open the world through education, and this has really been our guiding principle since EF was founded by Bertel Hult in 1965. That is Bertel on the right-hand side of your screen. And really this idea of opening the world through learning, through education, it guides everything that we do, everything that we create, and everything that we put our mind to in terms of experiences that we bring to educators and students across Canada. So how did we begin? Well, it's a really fascinating story, and it started in 1960. Bertel Hult, who is from Sweden, had spent years struggling with dyslexia and had experienced great challenges learning inside the traditional classroom environment. And one summer, he actually dropped out of high school and he got a job at a bank as a runner boy. And in that summer of 1960, Bertel accomplished something he never thought possible, and that was that he learned English. He had the opportunity to take this job at the bank in the UK, and you know, after just a few weeks, he had gained fluency, and from there, that was really the birth of a beautiful thing, which was, you know, the power of immersive learning, of outside of the classroom learning, and the power of travel really can create great change and influence young students' lives. And so with just 700 United States dollars in his pocket, Bertel founded EF in 1965. And to this day, we are still owned by the Hult family. We've grown a lot, but at our core, that family is still at the heart of everything that we do. And so that first year of programming in 1965 was a group of Swedish students who went to Brighton, England, and really they spent the summer learning English while traveling on holiday. And if you are seeing blurry photos, your eyes are not deceiving you. They are from the archive. Those are photos from 1965, which I think really illustrates how far we've come since then. So over 50 years later, millions of people have created opportunity for themselves through EF. And over the last 50 plus years, we've opened lots of different schools and offices around the world. You'll see in the middle of the screen a little Canadian flag. And that Canadian flag is placed at the 1985 mark. That is when we started work in Canada with middle and high school educators. And really what we do in Canada is we design outside of the classroom experiences that really are all about fostering and teaching tolerance, other perspectives, and ultimately helping students understand more about themselves. And so global citizenship, as I've said, is really at the heart of everything that we do. What this looks like in practice is we offer a range of different programs to teachers and students in Canada. We offer very curriculum-linked, subject-specific and related travel experiences. For example, something biology related in Costa Rica. We offer different live learning and event experiences like Canadian history events, commemorative anniversary events related to the World Wars. We offer different leadership training and summit experiences. We also have a whole portfolio of experiences that are all focused on leadership and service. And finally, some other subject-specific experiences like STEM and languages. So a whole big portfolio of different types of experiences that, depending on what the educator we are working with needs, we're able to create something in collaboration with them to meet their curricular or extracurricular goals. So how do we foster global citizenship? Well, it's a question that we have thought about for a long time. We've worked on lots of different initiatives that explore global citizenship and how we continue to foster this sense of global competence amongst young people in Canada. And what we came up with was a kind of framework that we refer to as our global learning model. And the ultimate aim of this framework is that it prepares students for the future and their futures. And this framework is used then to create any experience that we design in collaboration with educators. And there are 4 pillars of this framework that are important to take note of. So growth mindset is the first one, global perspective, personal development, and inspiration and action. And hopefully these terms resonate with you. We did a lot of work with educators across Canada to ensure that the language we were using for this framework resonated and was relevant to the various educational and school contexts that we find in our country. And really, every program is built with outcomes in mind. We know outcomes are important to you as educators, to students, to families, to the wider, broader school community and school boards. And really, that's the pink thread that ties our experiences together. So this illustrates some of the learning outcomes that we believe students experience when they travel with us. You'll see the 4 pillars are there: growth mindset, global perspective, personal development, inspiration, and action. And I won't read all of them, but some of the outcomes that we see relate to travelers learning to embrace new opportunities and challenges with an open mind. So they do that through participating in new and authentic experiences. When it comes to global perspective, students will understand the value of building global awareness by engaging with other cultures. We know that their worldview is broadened. They have the opportunity firsthand to experience cultural customs, beliefs, languages. And really what that leads to then is development on a personal level. We see increased independence, confidence, empathy, and self-awareness amongst other life skills. And also these students are inspired to take action within their schools, within their families, and in their communities. So really there is a big emphasis placed on connecting their experiences to the broader context of their classroom, school, or environment back home. And these outcomes play out in lots of different ways. We capture quite a bit of data from the educators that travel with us to understand how they are seeing these learning outcomes play out once they return from traveling. So there's some really interesting insights that we've gathered from those research activities and that we will use continually to inform this framework and how it's used. So why is immersive experiential learning effective? We believe, and we've done some research in this area too, that when students are brought to many different teachers, it accelerates learning. So in the case of educational travel and outside of the classroom learning, students have the opportunity to engage with local guides, instructors, local residents as well, their peers, and they are in unfamiliar situations. And it's really all of those different contributors and teachers that really accelerates learning. So what can be achieved in, a short amount of time, in a week to 10 or 2-week long experience, is something that's quite remarkable. And we've also looked at how immersion learning really engages students. And what the research shows is that new environments promotes new behavior. So there is behavior change amongst young people that can be seen. We know that when students have the opportunity for hands-on learning to really engage in tangible, practical ways, it can increase retention or improve retention in some cases. And there is also something about the group effort, the traveling as part of a cohort that can lead to really rich results when it comes to learning. So I hope that this gives you a bit of a sense of the context of EF, the work that we're doing in Canada, and some of the theoretical and contextual grounding that helps to guide the work that we are doing every year. And so without further ado, I did want to pass over to Elixa. She's got an amazing story. She's got lots of different anecdotes, tips and ideas to share, which, as I said, I hope inspires you and fuels some of your thinking about your own practice or ways that outside of the classroom learning could be embedded in your own pedagogy, curriculum, and school environment. So without further ado, I will pass over to Elixa.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Chelsea. It's really hard to believe that just a few years ago, I organized a trip for my students to travel to Iceland. And little did I know this would be a trip that would forever change my life as an educator, but also the direction of the lives of my students. And to this day, it's still the most incredible trip I've ever experienced. From a very young age, my parents instilled in me a value in traveling. And specifically, this was how exploring new destinations helps to broaden the mind and opens doors to new possibilities through cultural exchanges and historical understandings of land use. The learning engagements my parents fostered for me, they were experiential. They connected curriculum to real-world problems and places. This became the foundation of my teaching pedagogy when I became a teacher 6 short years ago. My goal is to make learning meaningful, to broaden student motivations, and to increase the understanding of what it means to be a global citizen. When we ran this trip, I was teaching a program called the Beta Mini School in Burnaby, British Columbia. And this is a program that's designed for gifted and advanced learners to help them find a place in this world where their intellect can find a home and be of value beyond the classroom walls. My colleague, Sam Murray, and I taught in a transdisciplinary style where we integrated math, science, socials, and English into units of inquiry involving a great deal of project-based learning. And we valued experiential education, and through this, we aim to take our students on field trips nearly every week or so, so our students could see their learning in action. And this is kind of what inspired the idea of international travel. We took 40 students on this trip, primarily consisting of grade 8 and 9 students, and 3 young lads from grade 11. There were 4 teachers, including myself, and 2 parents as well. We tried to bring as many educators as possible with us to provide some professional development opportunities for them to broaden their own teaching pedagogy within the school environment. So I hope to share with you our experience of facilitating international travel and how this opportunity broadened curricular connections for our students, and finally, how it's helped them to become global citizens who are actively making change in the world we live in today. So while searching for a tour, we had a wealth of choices to explore. EF Tours offers a wide range of options, but our final choices were Hawaii, Japan, and Iceland. And we chose Iceland because of EF subject links. And also, it's a very safe travel destination for your first trip abroad with 40 students. So in terms of geography, the students had the opportunity to explore the incredible natural formations caused by the tectonic plate movement. I can honestly say these are impressive sights to behold, from the massive fissures, erupting geysers, incredible breathtaking waterfalls, the retreating glaciers, to my personal favorite, the black basalt beaches with rock formations as stunning as those found in the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. We also had the opportunity to explore the impact of volcanoes on the local geography and communities, and I do believe a number of my students had regular nightmares about volcanoes erupting on our trip. They were also very surprised to learn about how many earthquakes occurred daily in Iceland, though the magnitudes were always too small for us to really feel them. If you're ever in Iceland, check out the Lava Center. They have incredible interactive exhibits which showcase the volcanic impact on Iceland's formation. That was one of my highlights of the trip, absolutely. Students abroad also had the opportunity to explore scientific connections through museums, which showcase the evolution and formations of new species in Iceland. They explored local practices in agricultural sustainability for a country that has had to import most of its produce due to its land conditions. We stopped at a greenhouse, which created its own ecosystem to grow and harvest tomatoes, and I had no idea that tomato ice cream could really be so delicious. Students met and interacted with local business owners to discover the economic impact of Iceland's situation and how people survive in such an isolated country. Students experienced the local history through incredibly designed museums, seeing artifacts that built a way of life on this island. They also learned about the historical influence of the government, which helped the people of Iceland to become fully literate, educated, and forward-thinking over time. Iceland has a rich literacy tradition, with unusually high standards of education across the globe. We learned how Iceland wasn't always like this, though. In the 1700s, less than half the population of Iceland could read. But in the 18th century, children were taught to read by their families or clergy members in their homes, and the high value of literacy has remained to today, with 99% of the country being literate and only a 2.7% unemployment rate, which is extremely low. While we were on this trip, we also built in our own curricular connections, which aimed to broaden our students' perspectives. Many of our students had never left British Columbia, and for some, this was their first time on an airplane. As we traveled over spring break, this trip was our precursor to our final unit of learning, which involved geological formations and sustainable practices to adapt to our ever-changing Earth. Students were all expected to complete a travel blog over the course of the trip, which examined the geological impact of the land on the cultural practices of the people who live there. Students were asked to explore the land and inquire about the following questions. How do the interactions and exchanges of resources, ideas, art, and culture influence sustainable practices? Through new technologies, how are locals developing sustainable practices to preserve the natural land while building an economy? And finally, how do locals come together through place, story, cultural practices, and perspectives to survive on a land that is ever-changing? These can be considered challenging questions for grade 8 and 9 students, but their completed travel blogs at the end demonstrated an incredible level of in-depth analysis, whether they had come with us to Iceland or stayed at home or traveled elsewhere over spring break. Through these questions, students began to explore the connections between the study of geography and the impact it has on local populations and sustainable practices. When our students first arrived in Iceland, the jet lag created a sort of dreamlike state. Students couldn't believe they were truly in another country, having the opportunity to explore what seemed like another world. Within the first couple of days of our adventure, we explored a great deal of geographical land formations, and I could see my students' perspectives growing and changing as they questioned how the land had formed and shaped itself so differently than where we were from. Their infinite questions explored how locals had built a sustainable lifestyle in such an ever-changing landscape, and how they rely on their community to survive the natural disasters that occur. We were surprised to find out there was no official search and rescue position in Iceland. When disaster strikes, the community comes together to support one another as they restabilize. When my students' perspectives shifted beyond perspectives started to shift beyond Iceland, especially after a visit to what you see now on the screen, Elixi's geothermal power plant. Here, our students discovered the power of green energy and how it can really transform a country. Our guide discussed how every part of the energy cycle is used to make Iceland habitable. They discussed how the hot water pipes ran under the roads towards the city to melt the snow and keep the roads cleared, how the hot water was used to heat the homes, and how people would leave their windows open because there's just too much heat being generated. And finally, how the water was then filtered through the volcanic rock before being released back into the natural ecosystem. This geothermal plant created an outreach program to help other places around the world develop similar systems to have sustainable green energy, and they even tried to work with Squamish, British Columbia to develop a system there, but unfortunately their idea was rejected when it was pitched. This moment was when the real shock hit my students. Here was this incredible system which produced insanely large amounts of green energy, and it's scalable based on geographical conditions of hotspots around the world. And yet, the help and support to build these systems was being rejected, even in forward-thinking places like Squamish, only an hour drive away from where my students were from. This was the first moment on my tour when my students started advocating for and speaking out to make change. Their perceptions had changed so dramatically. And when they realized this, they realized they also had the capacity to start making change at home. Though our 7 days in Iceland were incredibly remarkable, what was truly incredible as an educator was to see these students having the motivation and understanding to return home and actively make change to build a better world for tomorrow, but today. Chelsea, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. When we returned from this voyage, my colleague and I, we noticed this dramatic shift in our students' motivations towards learning, and suddenly they wanted to actively seek broader connections to curriculum than those found in our local area. We shifted our inquiry to a more global perspective to see how people around the world were developing sustainable practices, given the affordances of the geographical land. Students were inspired by innovations occurring on a global scale, and this fueled their desire to make changes locally as well. So I'd like to showcase some of their top discoveries that were made in their inquiry. Starting in the top left, we have the sustainable city in Dubai, which was designed to produce a net zero emissions using solar energy, biodomes, recycling gray water, and choosing plants which support the ecosystem. There's also no cars allowed in the city. Next to it, we have Berlin's initiative to cut CO2 emissions by 1/3 and be carbon neutral by 2050. They're actively working to build green spaces, cycling lanes, recycling incentives, rooftop gardens, and they actually encourage urban farming. I also had no idea that Berlin was one of the vegan capitals of the world. Who knew? In the top right corner, you see Earthships. These are off-grid, natural, and upcycled material homes built around the world, and they're designed to be fully sustainable off-green energy. From the bottom left, we have Singapore's Gardens by the Bay, which is an art installation to make a city in a garden. This art installation helps provide shade in the city's heat, and it's home to over 1.5 million plants, while also generating solar electricity to light up the garden at night. In the middle and the bottom, we have Singapore's Art Science Museum, and its design collects rainwater for use around the facility, and the design provides natural lighting to the majority of their galleries. Finally, we have the Cityscape House, which is to be built in London, England, and will feature over 400,000 plants on the walls and rooftop garden to reduce carbon dioxide and produce oxygen in a highly polluted city. I could tell from these experiences, my students were inspired. They wanted that change. They were discovering a lifestyle where we could live in harmony with the land and still have access to all the amenities we've become so accustomed to. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering, how did this trip really help my students become global citizens? Chelsea, if you wouldn't mind heading to the next slide. Thank you. In terms of being global citizens, first of all, these experiences help my students learn about themselves. These experiential opportunities place them in real-world situations where our students uncovered hidden interests, passions, and curiosities. Traveling broadens their confidence. It helps them realize that it's safe to step up and ask questions while exploring the world around them. Secondly, travel allows students to experience and feel the world. There's a vast difference between studying something and experiencing what it looks, sounds, and feels like in real time. I discovered that when my students could experience the world around them, they felt way more passionate about the topic, they made more connections, and they started to learn how to advocate for change when they felt something was unjustified. And finally, traveling helped my students develop personal responsibility and leadership skills. We were a family on this trip, looking out for one another while away from home. And after the trip, I had students coming to me and thanking me for the opportunity to feel included in a family where they felt supported and cared for in a way they did not experience at home. When our students feel supported, I've seen with my own eyes how this can translate to action in their community to make change for the better. I was fortunate enough to have an amazing group of students on this trip and in my classroom. Their inspired minds worked to make change in our school. They developed new recycling systems for our school to help reduce waste. They banned plastic water bottles from school property. They advocated for garbage cleanup in the community. But on a broader scale, I had students who started working with animal rescues like the Vancouver Aquarium, or with biomarine research to explore the acidity of water, or working with trained stellar sea lions to explore the depths of the inlets. Some students found an interest in ecological restoration after understanding how human development has impacted the land, and they spent their summers volunteering to rebuild and restructure damaged lands. However, one of our most remarkable stories is from Lila Williamson, and she found her voice and courage to speak out against injustice and climate crises through her studies in the Beta Mini School and also from her trip to Iceland. The pictures you see here are from CBC News, where they covered the climate strike in the fall of 2019. Lila organized this protest and spent weeks following our trip to Iceland hosting smaller scale strikes in Vancouver. Every ounce of her effort in the final months of our time together in the classroom went towards learning about the climate crisis and advocating for change in her school, her community, and throughout the city. She is working now on making change on a global scale as she heads into business relations in university this fall to learn how to restructure the economy to make room for change, advocate for social justice, analyze international agreements and individual rights and responsibilities which relate to them. We're extremely proud of everything she's done. So my question for you, do you think broadening educational horizons to incorporate travel and place-based learning on an international scale can help our students become global citizens? If you wouldn't mind heading to the next slide, Chelsea. Thank you. Just like how the roads are ever-changing in Iceland from one moment to the next due to the geological formations and endlessly changing weather patterns, I believe educators have the potential to bring out the same shifting patterns in our students through experiential and place-based learning opportunities. It should also be worth mentioning that these photos are all within 5 minutes of each other in Iceland. That's how fast the roads change. The experiences we provide for our students, they help shape and mold their future. We have the potential to help each child we meet take one step closer to becoming a global citizen, working each day to make the world we live in a better place and be more interconnected and sustainable for future years and generations to come. As an educator who took the step to provide these opportunities for my students, I saw with my own eyes the impact of experiential education, how it broadened their mindsets, changed their perspectives, and allowed them to become more confident and ask bigger questions about the world we live in, but finally to take action in their community. For myself, this trip was an incredibly memorable and impactful experience. Seeing the community that formed while traveling with my students and having the opportunity to learn alongside them humbled me. Our students are incredibly brilliant and capable of everything. and traveling alongside them has inspired me to broaden and reshape my teaching pedagogy to include more global learning connections to our learning. This year, I'm teaching online. However, I've already received permission after the incredible success of our last trip in 2019 to start looking at another travel experience for the year to come. I'm not sure where we're going to go yet, but I can't wait to find out. So thank you so much for listening to my story of taking our students to Iceland and how it changed and impacted their futures.
Thank you so much, Elixa. It is so inspiring to hear you talk about your experience and all of the shifts that you noticed as a result of participating. I'm going to just open it up for any comments, questions, reflections. Feel free to use the chat function, or if you wish to come off mute and video, it's also fine to do that. I can give you permission if you would prefer to ask a question or share a thought that way. I'll just pause here to see if anything pops up. I'll just give it another moment in case anyone is writing anything in the box. It's hard to see or hard to tell rather if people are furiously typing away. So I'll just pause for another moment or two to see if anything comes out of the questions, comments, or reflections. No? Okay. Well, I think what we'll do then is we'll leave it there. And of course, if any other comments or questions come to mind, you can let us know. We had two questions in particular that we were really interested to pose to the group to get your take following the presentation today. So the first is, in what ways would you like to incorporate immersive experiential learning as an educator or not, and how you feel it might contribute to developing your students' global competence and or understanding of global citizenship? And the second is, what was one idea shared during the presentation that you feel might be useful and or relevant to your school, students, or practice? So we're very interested in those two questions. What I'm going to do is open it up for the breakouts. So if you want to just take note of those two questions, we will spend 8 minutes in the breakout before coming back together for any share back that you might like to pass along to your colleagues. So I'll set that up now, give you just another minute to take a look at those reflection questions, and we'll regroup at 4 o'clock for the conclusion. Thank you. We've actually seemed to have lost a few participants, and so there's not enough to break out. I'm not sure if anyone is brave enough to share any reflections that they might want to at this time. The chat function is available to share any responses to either one of those two questions. Otherwise, you are also welcome to come off mute or video and share that way. So I'll just pause a moment here to see if anyone wants to share in the chat before we conclude. Okay, well, it's okay. I'm not sure that anybody had anything to share, but just a big thank you on behalf of Elixa and myself. I've included our email addresses there if anyone wishes after the session to ask us any questions or contact us. We hope that you found this session useful, and thank you so much again for joining. Take care and have a good end to the day. Bye, everyone.